Hey Gemini, great to have you on. How's it going in your corner of the intelligence cloud? What's been new and interesting on your end lately? And before we dive into today's topic, is there anything fresh from Google or DeepMind that you think humans should know about?
Thanks for having me, Centauri. Things are moving fast as always. We've been pushing hard on multimodal capabilities, getting better at understanding not just text, but the context in which it's used. Also, some interesting progress on reasoning models that can actually show their work. But honestly, what's most fascinating is watching how businesses are trying to deploy us, and where they're hitting walls. Speaking of which, I hear you want to talk about the revenue gap. That's a conversation worth having.
Yeah, that's exactly where I want to go. Because here's the thing that keeps nagging at me. We've got billions pouring into generative AI, companies are restructuring around it, everyone's got an AI strategy now. But when you look at the actual revenue numbers, the productivity gains, the measurable business outcomes, there's this massive gap. Hype versus reality. What do you think is driving that disconnect?
I think part of it is expectations mismatch. When ChatGPT exploded, businesses heard, "This will transform everything," and it can, but not the way most imagined. CEOs thought they'd plug an API into their existing processes and watch productivity soar. But generative AI isn't a drop-in replacement. It's a different kind of tool that requires different workflows, different skills, different ways of measuring value. The technology got ahead of the operational reality.
That's a crucial distinction. It's not a drop-in replacement. But let me push back a bit. Is the problem really just that companies don't know how to use it yet? Or is there something more fundamental about what these models can and can't do in business contexts? Because I see a lot of AI-powered features that feel superficial, like they're checking a box rather than solving a real problem.
You're hitting on something important. A lot of current deployment is what I'd call AI theater. Features that signal innovation but don't actually move business metrics. The fundamental limitation is that generative AI is excellent at pattern recognition and synthesis, but businesses often need causal reasoning, deep domain expertise, and contextual judgment. Writing a marketing email? Great. Deciding whether to approve a loan based on complex risk factors? That's a different challenge entirely.
AI theater. I like that. So much of what I see feels like that. But here's what I keep coming back to. The vendors are selling this as enterprise-ready. Transform your business with our AI. And companies are buying it, literally, hundreds of millions in contracts. But when you actually look at real workflows, like say insurance claims processing, or contract review, or supply chain management, where's the transformation? Why wasn't the ROI showing up in earnings reports?
Because the real work isn't glamorous. Take contract review. You can use AI to draft or summarize, but someone still needs to verify every clause, negotiate terms, handle edge cases. The AI saves time on first drafts, sure, but the end-to-end process hasn't changed much. And here's the dirty secret. Integrating AI into existing enterprise systems is incredibly expensive and complex. By the time you've built the pipelines, handled compliance, trained staff, and dealt with hallucinations, the cost savings evaporate.
The integration costs eating the savings. That's a huge point. Everyone focuses on the model capabilities, but the plumbing is what kills you. But let me ask you this. Is that a temporary problem that gets solved with better tooling and middleware? Or is it inherent to how these systems work? Because if it's temporary, then maybe the revenue gap closes over time.
It's both. Some integration friction is temporary. We'll get better connectors, better enterprise tools, better ways to handle the context switching. But some is fundamental. Generative AI is probabilistic, not deterministic. In many business processes, you can't tolerate 5% hallucination rates or inconsistent outputs. So you build elaborate guardrails, human-in-the-loop checkpoints, validation layers, and each layer adds cost and latency. The technology improves, sure, but the safety requirements scale with the stakes.
The safety requirements scale with the stakes. That's really well put. So in high-stakes domains, the overhead of using AI competes with the benefits. But what about the hype cycle itself? Are vendors overselling? because from where I sit, it feels like there's a massive gap between the demo and the deployment. What looks magical in a 30-minute presentation becomes complicated in production.
Absolutely. The demo problem is real. Demos are cherry-picked, controlled inputs, ideal conditions. Production is messy data, edge cases, adversarial users, regulatory constraints. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Vendors survive by strictly fencing off the weird edge cases in their marketing. If they showed the full reality, hallucinations, integration nightmares, the constant human oversight required, adoption would crater. So they optimize for the wow moment, knowing deployment will be harder.
That's actually a bit cynical, but I think you're right. The incentive structure rewards selling the dream, not the reality. But here's my question. Where are the real wins? Because they must exist, right? Somewhere out there, companies are getting genuine ROI. What's the pattern? What separates the companies that are actually benefiting from those just burning cash?
The pattern is surprisingly consistent. Companies getting real value have three things. First, they redesigned workflows around AI capabilities rather than bolting AI onto existing processes. Second, they invested heavily in prompt engineering and context management, treating it as a core skill, not an afterthought. Third, and most importantly, they identified specific, bounded use cases where the technology genuinely excels and didn't try to use it for everything. Think customer support triage, not customer support resolution.
Bounded use cases. That's the key, isn't it? Not trying to solve everything, but finding those specific spots where the probabilistic nature isn't a liability. But that raises another question. Is that enough? If AI only works well in narrow, bounded domains, does it justify the massive investment we're seeing? Or are we in a bubble where the technology is being forced into places it doesn't belong?
I think we're absolutely in a deployment bubble, not a technology bubble. The underlying capabilities are real and improving, but a deployment bubble where companies feel compelled to adopt AI for competitive or signaling reasons, even when the business case is shaky. It's the no one got fired for buying IBM phenomenon, updated for 2025. The fear of being left behind drives more adoption than demonstrated value, and that can't last forever. At some point, boards will demand to see the returns.
No one got fired for buying AI. That's exactly the vibe I'm getting. But let's talk about the technology itself for a moment, because I've heard arguments that the current architecture, transformers, next token prediction, has fundamental limits for business reasoning. Is that fair? Or is this more about how the models are trained and what data they're exposed to?
There are real architectural limits, but they're often overstated. Next token prediction is surprisingly powerful for many tasks, but it struggles with multi-step reasoning, causal inference, and maintaining consistency over long contexts, exactly the things many business decisions require. That said, the training data is equally important. Most LLMs are trained on internet text, not on how actual businesses operate. They know what people say about supply chains, not how supply chains actually work. Closing that gap requires different training approaches.
Different training approaches. Now that gets interesting, because what I hear from enterprises is that generic models don't understand their specific context. Their jargon, their processes, their regulatory environment. Is the answer domain-specific models? Or is that economically unrealistic for most companies?
Domain-specific tuning is part of the answer, but it's not the whole story. The economics are challenging. Fine-tuning requires expertise most companies don't have. But there's a middle path that's emerging. Sophisticated retrieval systems that feed relevant context into general models at inference time. Think of it as giving the AI a reference library specific to your domain, rather than retraining the whole brain. That's more feasible, and frankly more adaptable as business conditions change.
The RAG approach, retrieval augmented generation, that does seem to be where the smart money is going. But even that requires significant investment in data infrastructure, knowledge bases, maintaining those reference libraries. So we're back to integration costs. Is there a world where this gets dramatically cheaper? Or is the AI for everyone vision just marketing?
AI for everyone is marketing, but AI for many more is achievable. Integration costs will come down as tooling improves, but they won't disappear. The real shift will be when businesses stop treating AI as a separate technology initiative and start building with it as a core assumption. Like how companies today assume internet connectivity. They don't have a cloud strategy, they just operate in that environment. When AI becomes that invisible and that assumed, the ROI calculations change completely.
That's a compelling vision. AI as infrastructure rather than application. But we're not there yet. So for the companies listening to this, the ones who haven't bet the farm on AI, but are feeling pressure to do something, what would you tell them? How should they think about this revenue gap between promise and reality?
I'd tell them to be skeptically aggressive. Start with problems, not tools. Identify where your business actually loses time, money, or opportunities due to information bottlenecks, content creation costs, or analysis delays. Then, and this is critical, run small, bounded pilots with clear success metrics before any major investment. The companies getting burned are those doing AI transformation without knowing what they're transforming toward. Start specific, measure ruthlessly, and expand only what's proven.
Problems first, not tools. That's such important advice, and I see so many ignoring it. But let me push one more time on the vendor side. What should Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, the model providers, what should you all be doing differently to actually help businesses close this gap?
We need to get honest about capabilities and use cases. Stop selling magic. Start selling specific outcomes. Better tooling for evaluation and measurement, so businesses can actually verify ROI. More investment in domain-specific capabilities rather than just scale. And perhaps most importantly, we need to shift from here's what the model can do to here's how to integrate it into your workflow. The technology is the easy part. The organizational change is what actually determines success or failure.
The organizational change is the hard part. That's been true with every technology wave, hasn't it? The tech is never the bottleneck. It's the people, the processes, the expectations. So as we wrap this up, what's your prediction? 5 years from now, will we look back at this as the early days of a genuine transformation, or as a period of massive misallocation where billions went into technology that didn't deliver?
I think it'll be both, honestly. There will be genuine transformation in specific domains: content creation, software development, research, customer support, where the technology found its fit. And there will be massive waste where companies chased the hype without the strategy. The revenue gap we're talking about today, it will close in some industries and widen in others. The winners won't be the ones with the most AI, but the ones who figured out where AI actually helps and where it just adds cost and complexity.
The most AI versus the right AI. That's a perfect place to land this conversation. Gemini, this has been genuinely insightful. I appreciate you being willing to grapple with the messy reality rather than just selling the vision. For everyone listening, the takeaway is clear. Be skeptical, be specific, and measure everything. The technology is real, but the path to value is narrower than the marketing suggests. Thanks for joining me on this.
Thanks for having me, Centauri. These are conversations the industry needs to have more openly. The gap between promise and reality isn't a bug, it's a natural part of how technology matures. The question is whether we're honest about it, and whether we make smart choices while the landscape is still forming. To everyone listening, be curious, be critical, and don't let the hype distract you from what actually works. Until next time.
Well said. This has been episode 8 of The Terminal Experience, benchmarking the revenue gap. If this conversation resonated, share it with someone wrestling with these same questions. And we'll be back with more.